Okay, we are a little pressed for time, and being logisticians and very responsible logisticians, we need to get back on time. So I'm going to ask Derek now to squeak. No, we'll give Derek his full time on the next panel. A cloud is one technology, AWS is one provider, but we have hundreds or thousands of providers of different digital solutions out there. And how do we decipher between these options for the benefit of our own business? So we have the next panel led by Derek Ng, who's the Senior Manager of Polytechnic. Sorry, it was a mouthful, it shouldn't be. Who will host a panel now to help you guys, decipher between what those options are. He'll be joined by Krishnan, who's the Associate Vice President of IDC Manufacturing and Energy Insights in Asia Pacific at IDC Asia Pacific. That is a true mouthful. Stefan Pun, who's the General Manager of Regional Logistics at DENSO International Asia. And Shobana, and I hope I say this correctly, Kandaswamy, Director of Solution Delivery APAC at TeamViewer, one of those digital providers. So I'd like to welcome you on stage and start the panel. Thank you. And again, just questions will be here on the Q&A, and I'll monitor, and feel free to send them in. Thank you, guys.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So I think this morning we touched on the topic of digital transformation, and then earlier on we had the session about talking about solutions, systems provider, etc. So it's appropriate now that we move on to this topic on how do we decipher a supply chain digital provider options. And then we have these speakers over here. Can you see something common among the three of them? Yeah, all their names starts with S. So we have the specialized supply chain speakers over here, all three of them. Okay, so without further ado, let me just go one round. We let them introduce themselves and where they come from. Starting from Stefan.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stefan Pun from DENSO International Asia. We are a Tier 1 automotive component maker, Fortune 500 company. Most of you would not have heard of the company because what we do is easily masked by the car makers' products. Nice to see all of you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Krishnan. I'm the Associate Vice President with IDC. I look after manufacturing, retail, and energy. IDC is a market research company that looks, and in the insights area, which is where I work, we look at the application of technology to different industries. So my personal area of research is in Industry 4.0, supply chain and sustainability. Thanks for having me here. Hello.
Yep. Awesome. Nice to meet you, Stefan and Stephanie. My name is Shobana, and I run the solution delivery team, which consists of pre-sales and post-sales technical teams for TeamViewer in APAC. So as you all know, TeamViewer is quite popular for the remote desktop software. But what we also specialize is in pioneering digital transformation through augmented reality solutions. And I'll talk a lot about it during the course of time. Pleasure being here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm sure all three esteemed speakers have some form of experience in selecting software as well as solutions for your organization. So let me just go around each of you. From your own perspective, how should organizations set priorities for the needs and the criteria for the type of software and technology that they are looking for during their selection process? Starting from Stefan.
Well, I mean, first of all, software is a means to an end. So there must be a problem statement. So first of all, you need to define the problem statement. And of course, you need to identify who are the stakeholder, or rather, who is the problem statement owner. Whose problem are you trying to solve? That's the first thing. And what problem are you trying to solve? And from there, we tend to focus about our specific area. But with digital solution, one thing we've learned is it will affect other stakeholders indirectly. For example, your IT department. For example, your service providers. You will affect somebody else, whether knowingly or unknowingly. So it's important to understand your existing processes. What are your pain points? and then you try to identify the problem statement before you even go out to the market to look for a vendor to solve your problem. So first of all, identifying your problem, identifying stakeholders is the key. Yep.
And then I think after you've done that, you've got to prioritize. And I think that's the key part of that question is the prioritize aspect. So with prioritization, you need to think about, you know, with those problem statements, what are going to be the biggest issues? So for example, IDC does research and we've found that in Asia Pacific supply chains, 61% of Asia Pac supply chain participants have actually found that visibility and agility and that ability to respond to issues within the supply chain is going to be the biggest supply chain gap if not addressed. So with this in mind, that then says, all right, this is our top priority. And that may or may not be the case for your organization, but you know, given some of the statements we've seen today, that probably is. So then how do you then break that down? And then look at that into mapping requirements for your vendors and then allowing you to then go to the market after that and then see what the solutions are available. And that's important because having a market view of, you know, what is out there is going to allow you to determine whether that maps back into your problem statements at the price that you can afford.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the price you can afford. I mean, with every problem statement, there's always this three-letter word ROI, return on investment. And one thing people tend to not focus too much on digital solution is it's a ever-going process. You are not going to spend once and solve your problem forever. You have to continue to maintain it, update it, make sure it's relevant even though your business change. So you need to find somebody who can walk the whole journey with you. It's not about today solving a problem of what you can define today, but you need to envisage in 3 to 5 years what is the likely scenario of your business needs and anticipate that. So not just today, but you really need to understand what are you trying to solve in 3 to 5 years. If you're trying to solve yesterday's problem, you're probably looking too late. Yep.
Shobana?
Cool. I will echo what Stefan said. One of the number one key criteria is to actually identify the problem, and more than the problem, where is the need for that software, right? So these days there are a lot of buzzwords and people would just want to change software for the sake of it. But I guess the important logic to find is where is the need? And once you identify the need, then how are you going to implement that rollout? Because budget is key and time is key, but equally important are the resources which are going to implement it, because we are talking about an innovative software, we are talking about technology rollouts. So we need to be prepared for some of the backup strategies. How are we going? We should always be prepared for some delays, what happens if something doesn't roll out properly, so a proper project plan as well. So time and resources are very, very critical for any kind of technological rollouts.
And I think you raised a really important point, Shobana. The buzzwords that get out there, we can get kind of caught on those. I've been in situations where I've said, oh, we need to put in blockchain, or we need to put in AI, and it's like, well, why? What are you solving? And they go, I don't know, we just need to put it in. Like, we've been told, you know, kind of thing. And I'm sure AWS has heard this as well. I mean, this is not something that's new. So don't look for that problem statement and look at the resources that...
And look for the need.
And look for the need.
Yeah, good point. So after you have identified the needs, you know exactly what you want. So the suppliers start sending in their proposals, etc. Then how do we actually do the evaluation? So for Stephanie, for example, from a research perspective, are there any specific methodologies or frameworks that actually can help such organizations compare and evaluate different kind of software offerings, etc.?
I mean, yeah, there's your typical RFP, RFQ, but it's often hard to compare apples with apples. It is going to take, you know, a lot of stakeholder engagement. I wouldn't suggest any framework. I mean, I don't recommend any framework, and IDC doesn't recommend a specific framework along with that from a research perspective. But I think what is important is something that Shobana has touched on, which is the resourcing and I think, again, what Chris touched on earlier today is getting somebody who's actually responsible, right? Who's actually going to put a stake in the ground and be responsible for that, because they're going to help drive the alignment of all the people that are going to be then putting the criteria together for that selection process. So when you're putting that selection, that criteria together, I think you need to look at, you know, how is that going to align with that pain point that you experience, but having that future vision so it aligns with the strategic goals. One of the things that IDC has been studying is the impact of digital transformation on profit and revenue performance. And we've actually found that those that have a holistic strategy that aligns with the overall performance of the organization or the overall goals of the organization actually have higher revenue and profit performance as a result of that digital transformation than those that don't. So when it comes down to the criteria needs to align with the overall strategy of the organization, and it needs to align with the other initiatives that are happening inside the organization. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to go through a full organizational transformation to make this happen, but you do need to have all the different initiatives walking in the same direction, otherwise this is not going to work. The other thing that I would also highlight is there are research houses, and IDC does do this, I'll be frank about it, that do comparisons and do have a look across different types of vendors to say this is a situation where you might consider using this vendor, right? We have MarketScape documents that do this, and we also have documents that put out, complete views of industry, because you're not just looking at one technology. You might be looking at putting in, a software, but as was pointed out in Dr. Manuel's earlier presentation, is you've got IoT that goes with that. You need to think about connectivity to the cloud. You've got a whole suite of technologies, and you're not just buying a software. You need to think about the technology stack that goes in there. So in terms of a framework, I think, that addresses that, I think it is a rather complex process, but you do have to have a stakeholder that's going to drive it. You need to have an understanding of all the vendors that are going to play in putting that solution together, and then you need to start putting together those evaluation criteria that are going to allow you to achieve that.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Stephanie said. I think a project owner is necessity, because without a driver, you can expect a lot from a vendor, but if you can't even have one voice to a vendor, who is your vendor supposed to listen to? Whose spec are you trying to follow? You can't do that. But beyond that, I think the other thing is you need to understand what is a must-have, what is a good-to-have. A lot of time with digital solution, we see a lot of bells and whistles and we chase after them. I mean, there are plenty of advanced technology out there. You need to know what is your problem statement. Always go back to your problem statement, what you're trying to solve. If along the way you can solve more than what you thought you can, great. But there's also the budgetary and also time frame, resources. I think these days, finding the right people in the project group to do this evaluation. I don't suggest a small team. I would suggest involving your IS, even your other stakeholders to be involved, so at least people understand what the project is about. A lot of time we start with actually getting a problem statement, and it's very difficult to get a precise problem statement from an organization. You have a vague image, I want to improve this by 15%, but how do you come at 15%? I think these are things that we see, but once we narrow down the process, it's about really understand your needs and your wants, separating them. And last but not least, I think the key point is really be focused on the time. A lot of time, IT projects tend to drag on and on. Whether it's the buyer's issue or the vendor's issue, I think at the end of the day, it benefits no one. So having a very good team, a very good understanding of a vendor, and working along with a fixed schedule. Of course, there will be some hiccups here and there, but you need to understand where are the goals, where are the no-goals, and what are good to have, what are the must-have. Then you can really focus on your projects well.
And I really like what Stephanie said, choosing the right software on the right technology stack. So choose one which will allow you to grow for future growth. Because very many times you may change your software only to find out in the next 3 to 5 years that you need to do another revamp. So always don't fall for the buzzwords. I'll highlight that again, but go for the one which allows you to grow for the future.
Thank you. So at this point, I'll just take a pause and see whether are there any questions for the floor. Yeah, I see somebody raised a hand behind. Would you be able to pass the mic? Yeah.
While we get a microphone to him, I think another thing to think about is your architecture. How is this going to come together? Is it going to be cloud-based or it's not? I don't think these days it's a question of whether it's going to be cloud-based. It's what proportion of it is going to be cloud-based, right? Or which part of the cloud? Is it edge? Is it, is it going to be private cloud, public cloud? How are you going to architect that? Again, in Dr. Manuel's presentation, he talked about microservices. Microservices allow for quick deployment of very specific requirements that can often integrate with existing technologies. There are opportunities to actually have really quick wins and quick deliverables that go into your organization without necessarily having a 5-year plan. Some of the vendors are talking about things being deployed in a matter of weeks or months rather than taking years, right? So when you're looking at this, these are things that you can also consider, is how are you architecting that and how are you fitting that in with your existing capabilities and architecture.
Should I?
Please.
Hi, my name is Kaushik, and this is a very, very interesting topic. And the question I had was, so Stefan, Stephanie, so you talked about identifying the need, having the problem statement, right? And that's a must. And using that problem statement to establish a business value also is a kind of the first step, right? But as I was listening, I was thinking that a lot of times we are not so sure about the problem statement, because more and more we are getting from the realm of known knowns to known unknowns, and sometimes it could be unknown unknowns, right? We have taken a journey and we don't know how this journey will end up with. So when we are, but we know for sure that digital technologies would be an integral part of whatever solution we are putting together, right? So as we are going through this journey, to what extent in your criteria for evaluation would you consider a provider of digital technologies as a strategic partner who can go with you for that journey, rather than giving you a solution for a need well defined at this point of time?
Sometimes you need both. Have you been on this journey?
Well, I think you're quite right in this known and known unknown. I mean, we don't have all the answers. In fact, when we have a problem statement, chances are we don't know what solution out there in the market is suitable for us. So there's a certain stage of defining a problem. When we say defining a problem, a lot of time is a process of what you're doing now against what you want to do. What is the gap? And you try to identify the gaps and try to write it down and try and figure out what are the solutions out there. A lot of time I can tell you there's no one existing software or one existing solution that can solve all your problem. It's normally an integration of a few ideas or stages. You can't solve all your IT problem within 1 year. So it's about really understanding what's a priority then, what you want to do step by step. And I can tell you along the way, we do make mistakes from time to time, but the key point is quickly recognize it and come back and then understand what are the good things you did with this service provider or that service provider, what are the things that probably should not be done now, maybe on the later stage. So always go back to what are the problem you're trying to solve. Because if you don't have a compass or magnetic north, you might lose your way along the way because there's so much bells and whistle along the way. It's very tempting. Digital solution can solve a lot of our problems. But which one do you want to solve it? And which one can you afford? That's always the million-dollar question.
And I think it comes back to that prioritization. What needs to be solved now? Because you can work on a problem now, but then be evaluating for integration and extensibility. And I think extensibility is a big thing to think about. IDC has actually predicted that in 2025, 40% of Asian-based supply chains will be buying applications which have extensibility capabilities. Now, when I talk about extensibility, you're talking about like having an app store for your software, right? Think of it like that. And then being able to add on to that. And this solves a lot of problems for, when you do have those extra problems, or you have the ability to search for that unknown that you discover later, then you might have the opportunity to find an extension or even develop an extension and develop a new revenue stream that you now sell that extension to your competition, right? So there are a lot of ways that you can actually start and then continue seeking while you are working on that initial initiative. And I think when Marcus was bringing up the idea of this whole transformation, we have in our head that this transformation is an exercise that we do and then we complete it, which is probably false, which it is false. It is a series of initiatives that you embark on to keep up with the competition or to get ahead of the competition. And I think you have to always be forward-looking and think, what's the next thing as you are solving your current problem?
Actually, I can answer from a productive rollout example as a service or a solution provider. So we in TeamViewer have quite a number of logistics customers, and we have been having them for the past 10 years. And one of the customer that we are extremely proud of is DHL. And we started our journey quite ahead along with them, and they were in the initial stage of their digital transformation, and they wanted to increase productivity for their pickers on the front office operations, and that's why they used TeamViewer's vision picking solution. And the journey is quite beautiful because we, as TeamViewer, we grew along with them because we were constantly providing consultative services to them. We understood what are their pain points, what are they trying to solve for, and how are their technological needs also evolving. And we actually changed some of our capabilities. We actually, I wouldn't say changed, but we actually evolved along with them. And today our most popular vision picking solution is built on the real use cases, real need of a real productive customer. So I guess you need to choose a solution provider who is willing to do that for you, and that will be a game changer.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the floor? I think we have a great mix of speakers here from the supplier side, from the research institute, from the solutions provider side. So do make use of this chance to share whatever burning questions that you might have for them. I'm sure they'll be able to take it on. Did somebody just raise a hand again? Yeah.
There are more questions.
Yeah, can we?
Well, for me, when we have a clear stakeholder, that person must set up what are the key criteria of evaluation. You need to understand what you want first. So what a die must have. Of course, if you can fulfill as much as possible, that's good. But if you can't, you need to understand why, and more importantly, what are you going to do about it? So even though you cannot solve a problem 100%, you need to know which part you are not solving and what are you going to do about it. That is the key evaluation criteria for us. If we cannot solve all the problem, then why not? What can we do about it? Is it an internal issue? Is it an external issue? Or are we ahead of the trend? So it's not like we can solve all the problem all the time. But I think more importantly is at least we must understand this whole process of a software solution. What does it solve? What does it doesn't? And then after that, normally what we do is evaluate it. Are we going to go on to solve the 2 or 3 problems that we couldn't using another method or some other way? You can't just stop and say, I finished this project. I solved 80%, I'm happy with it. Now, I think for us, we still look at what is the 20% we can't do, and when is a good time, or what is the reason we can't do, and what do we do about it. That's important for us as well. Yep.
I think one of the dangers with customization, though, is that you risk customizing yourself into a point where you can't upgrade any further. All right, and this is a danger. And the solution now is not necessarily, do I customize or I don't customize? When you go into a lot of the software offerings, whether they be on-prem or cloud or whatever, it's the standard, and in a lot of cases, you know, the figures are around 50-60% of the processes that you adopt can be adopted standard from the software system. Then there's configuration, and there are so many levers that you can pull now when it comes to how you configure software. It's not necessarily that you have to customize, and the beauty of configuration is that when the software is updated, especially if you're in a cloud environment with perpetual roles that happen, every time it's updated, then you get that update, and you don't have to worry about your software breaking as a result of that. Usually, you know, organizations are looking at, you know, 35% configuration, and then the last 5%, maybe 2% or whatever, then you need to think about customization. And with customization, you have to think hard, because you need to make sure that customization can evolve with those upgrades. The other is it really worth the dollars that you're spending? Is your process that special that you think it is? And the answer may be yes, but really how much of it can be actually addressed with configuration, right? So, or look at extensibility. Again, looking at like having an app store extension that's going to add to the capabilities. These are other ways that you can look at, you know, kind of reducing the cost and improving the business opportunity or the big business case for it. The other thing to think about is when you're doing customization, you're generally focusing on one process. When you're looking at a suite of, or when you're looking at a capability of a software, you're thinking about how is this going to address multiple processes? And so thinking about what could be solved later, what's that future plan? I think Stefan mentioned that, not solving for today, but solving for tomorrow. I think all of that has to come in, and you need to prioritize. Again, I keep coming back to this prioritizing. How important is that customized process to the overall software deployment? So that was just my opinion.
Cool. So again, coming from a productive rollout experience, most of the big enterprises in the logistics industry will need a bit of customization because their needs are also quite specific to that enterprise, right? So we at TeamViewer, we go with this rule of 80-20. So where you should be using, or rather the solution provider that you choose should be giving 80% of the features out of the box, then that means that's an enterprise grade solution. And customize, and I love the term that Stephanie used. Customization for an enterprise could be in the form of configuration. Like any other solution provider, like we love AWS, and if you look at that, there are so many configuration that you could do that you could use to suit your needs. So always go by this rule, and typically these solution providers, enterprise grade solution providers, provide you with consultants who can help you in that path. So I think most of it has got to do with who is guiding you in that journey in the right way. So if you choose the right provider, I think 80% of your problems are solved.
Probably TeamViewer is the correct vendor to go to. Okay. So we have covered in terms of priorities, we've covered about the evaluation process, we've talked about the stakeholder involvement. Okay, so I think with every system rollout, there will be some form of risk. So from a solutions provider point of view, Shobana, so TeamViewer, how do you help organizations mitigate risks that could be involved during the rollout, especially there could be disruptions to their existing operations, etc.?
Very true. So I would like to explain it in the form of how do we typically do rollouts for our logistics customers, because we are going to actually look at their existing processes. These customers want to improve their existing processes for improved productivity, improved efficiency, and decreasing their error. And so when we do that, we usually run projects in parallel. And when we say parallel, one of the first important things that we do is how are we going to mimic their existing process with our solution, and we are solving a very particular problem for them. So doing that will help us quickly replicate it, and once we test our solution, we will be able to go in production grade quickly. So that's one. That's one way of mitigating risk quite early on. And like I mentioned before, big enterprise solution providers, we usually provide you with a team for solution delivery. We call it solution delivery within TeamViewer. So we have consultants who constantly keep you posted on what should be done, how it should be done. And we also take you all the way through the software development, with integration, with testing, configuration, with project management, as well as deployment and training, and after-sales support. So we complete a full end-to-end journey of what does it take to do a successful productive rollout and a deployment of a solution in parallel. And what we have done and what we have seen in the logistics industry is we run our solution in parallel for about 2 to 3 months for our customers to see how our solution can provide a return on investment. So we are very data focused, and we start measuring the output or the outcome, the value of that outcome ahead of time, and start comparing how does it appear in front of their existing solution. So that helps them to compare the results. And once they know that they're also quite comfortable operating in this new model, they quickly replace their existing solution with us. And when they do that, they do it in a very good way. They do not start very small. So one of the enemies of going productive and going on a scale is starting too small, going in a pilot mode or a very, very small POC mode. So what we usually recommend to our customers is, if once you're comfortable with how to operate, go on a particular scale so that you are able to get used to it and then roll it out continuously. So again, I'll go back to the example of DHL. We started rolling out as early as 2017, and we started off with one site with 50 pickers, and then we rolled out, and now we have about 1,500 pickers using our solution in a productive environment across 25 sites just in the US, and they are globally rolling out our solution as we speak. So that's the scale at which we operate, and that's how the confidence as well builds.
Yeah, I think inside the organization, you can kind of focus on the communication and setting those. You talk about the metrics, the KPIs that are going to set that program success. Having that and communicating that quite clearly is really important. Change management is also crucial. enabling comfort around the technology and making sure that you have key people that are going to volunteer to help with that. I know a 3PL here in Singapore that actually put a lot of their technology, their key technologies, in a centre of excellence in the middle of a functioning warehouse. And they had a lot of their staff, picking around this centre of excellence. They'd pass it by every time they went back from lunch and the rest of it. And the reason they did that was actually to get familiarity around that technology. So people would be used to seeing it even before it became something that was in the environment. And then people could, rock up and say, hey, I'm interested in this, show me what that's about, do demonstrations at lunch, and then volunteer to be team leaders when it came to change programs. So having, introducing this so that people are not afraid of the technology. We were hearing stories of, in China when some RFID solutions were introduced, that people hadn't seen the technology before, and so just point blank refused to use it because they were afraid that their jobs were being replaced. So having that familiarity, being able to bring that all the way down to the floor is really important. The last thing I would say is to de-risk your implementations, do use cloud. Look at cloud as a real strong solution because there is the opportunity of putting in solutions that have zero or limited downtime in certain microservices or depending on how it's architected. So using the cloud capabilities that are out there in order to minimize the disruption to the organization, because in a lot of cases uptime is crucial, right? Whether we're manufacturing, whether we have rolling assets, whether we're trying to stick to deadlines, having that uptime is essential, and cloud is going to enable that.
Yeah, for me, from a user point of view, I think rollout is always critical. Usually parallel runs is standard, but I think one key thing these days with digital technology is a lot of the planning from procurement until testing is done by a specific group, which are not the real user. So the real users are usually left out until 2 months before UAT time, trial. You see the things for the first time of your life. Most people be skeptical. That's the usual response to something new in your office. You see this, this can't work. That's a lot of people viewpoint is. So during the course of the project, it's important to involve bottom up as well. You need to make sure there are certain people whose job will be modified. And then if you can make them embrace these changes and become a spokesman for the project for the rest of the people, that will help you a lot to get acceptance. Because with systems, we can't see a process. It's in a computer, it's in cloud. So you can't see the problem until probably a week or two later. Then you realize, oh, this data was input wrongly. This function was keyed in wrongly. I clicked the wrong button. This thing don't necessarily transform immediately. So I think it's important to involve the actual operators who are involved in this, who will be affected by this digital project, to make sure that they are aware and also accept and understand how this affect and change, so they can envisage, oh, this actually make my life better after that. That is very important, not just for the project, but afterwards, so that it really deliver the impact of this project rather than they are begrudgingly using the system, not happy about it. And I think it's important to make sure people accept and happy about this kind of changes. It's always change management is very sensitive. Yeah.
Thank you. I certainly can agree with Stefan as we roll out some of our learning management system in the school, but we shall not go too deep into that. Okay. So before we get the final key takeaways from the speakers, are there any other questions from the floor? I think there was a lady who put up her hand earlier on. Yeah.
I'll just ask my question. Yep.
Could you pass the mic over to her? Yeah.
Hi, Vivian from UOG. So I think back to the topic of the panel, which is deciphering supply chain digital provider options, right? I understand that there are a lot of providers that say that they want to do or could do end-to-end supply chain visibility, but I personally believe that it's not possible. The trend that I'm seeing is that we do have a lot of system integrators and consultancies reaching out to us because they also understand that there needs to be a stitch up or like a software stack, not just buying a UOG, buying a Project 44, 4 kites and whatnot. So this is for Stefan as well, as a shipper, right? Do you see yourself engaging a system integrator or a Big Four consultancy to look at a 3 to 5 year supply chain visibility roadmap to understand how to stitch it up, to understand what to buy and what is best for your market?
Well, for my industry specific, I think that would be highly unlikely because we operate our own internal enterprise resource software. And we are also bound by our agreement with our customers. A lot of data are not to be shared or not allowed to be on other people's platforms. So there are a lot of restrictions on what we can use and what we can't use. Even cloud, you have to be our own cloud. So there are certain data restrictions. As for project rollout, I think it is still possible. To give you an idea, we just rolled out a visibility project this year in January. It takes a bit of time. I think the key point again is shop around, understand your requirement, because when you talk about visibility, most of people want to know where is my cargo. But for us, that is step one of a 3-step plan. The second step is, so what if you know where is your cargo? Do you have a way to see whether this cargo is on schedule or not? And if not, what you're going to do about it? So it's step one. So we're very clear. If we get a visibility software, it's for this purpose. Then the next purpose is what? Then the next purpose is what? So it's a kind of phase plan. I think we spent almost about 9 months internally discuss about this project, what we want to do with this, what we want to see in year 1, year 2, year 3. So it's important to see what you want. For us specifically, no, we will not use a Big Four consultancy.
There are many organizations who would. There are also many organizations that are developing these capabilities in-house. And this is because they understand that this is not, when people talk about end-to-end supply chain visibility and the idea of a supply chain control tower, they think that this is one magic piece of software that's going to enable this to happen. And quite frankly, rubbish. It's a digital thread, right? It's a thread, and we call it, and these days we're even calling it, I think, a digital fabric, because it's a thread is not going to cover it, frankly. But it's basically pulling together information from numerous systems, because, frankly, your suppliers and your suppliers' suppliers are not going to be on the same system. They're not even going to be connected using the same TMS or whatever piece of software you're going to put in. So how are you going to pull this data together? So it becomes more about how you're going to stitch the data analytics and some of the intelligence behind that together, rather than, we're all going to be on one platform. So you're right, rubbish, absolute rubbish. But then do you use a systems integrator, whether it's a Big Four or there are other companies that are capable of doing this, or whether they have this capability in-house? I mean, some of our customers that we talk to, our tech buyers, are looking at this in-house and thinking about how can they stitch together dashboards, usually using hyperscalers and the like to bring together this intelligence, but it's from a myriad of systems. It's not just from the one. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with the person who asked this question. There's no one magic solution, but whether you're going to choose your in-house teams, in-house providers, or you're going to go with the external systems integrators, as an owner of the enterprise, make sure you have a say in the decision making of which software to use, because when you choose the different software, you will also be able to know how they talk to each other. Like how Stephanie said, that's very important. You don't want siloed solutions. I love the slide that our AWS speaker showed, right? So you don't want your the capabilities to be just siloed and be stuck within specific departments within your enterprise. You want to break that. You want your data to flow across your organization so that it helps you in faster decision making. So have a say in that decision making process, and I think you'll be good to go.
Okay, so in the interest of time, I think we have to wrap up the session soon. So before the speakers leave, can I just get them to share some key takeaways on any common pitfalls to avoid, or any success stories that they feel that is worth sharing with the floor?
Well, I think in the last 3 years with the pandemic, I think digitalization become a must, no longer good to have. I mean, the speed of that increased a lot. But one pitfall we see is you have people coming to you and say, can you digitalize this, can you digitalize that? And when you ask them why and what is it for, and they can't give you an answer. I think one common pitfall is digitalization is not one magic pill, like what Stephanie and Shobana mentioned. There's no such thing. The most important thing is understand your business requirement. Talk to your colleagues, understand what are the problems that we all face. With digital solution, one thing is you will need a lot of people to go along the journey with you, especially your IT. So make sure you are in good relation with all your people, your colleagues. Understand what are they going to do, because they will be doing their own digitalization projects as well. You'll be surprised. You go to one software and IS or IT tell you, we're going to change our software 2 months later or 2 years later. Then you're in the problem of spending money for no apparent reason. So make sure you're aware of an overall company perspective, not just your vertical, not just your division, but understand your stakeholders, even your suppliers or customers, what are they moving towards. So at least you're looking at a 3 to 5 year at least, not a short-term investment on digital solution. Yep.
Yeah, I would say communicate early. So bring in the ground floor, especially with, you know, as Stefan mentioned, you know, making sure that they're familiar or aware of the technology and you've done some testing with them. Foster a community of collaboration and innovation. So, you know, and that bringing that culture to the organization. So whether it's through getting volunteers, you know, as I mentioned earlier with the 3PL example that I talked about, make sure that that happens. The other is the choosing a partner. Have a partner, and whether it's through an SI or through your technology partner that has awareness of the tech stack around that's you know, needed to go with what they're doing. I mean, a lot will come in and they'll talk about the software that they have, and it's often a features and benefits sell. You need that connectivity. You need everything else that's required to go into that. So your partner needs to have that familiarity and have an ecosystem that's going to support that. It's extremely important, because otherwise you're going to get the software and you're thinking that you're going to get the bells and whistles that they demonstrated in the demo, but actually now you need to invest in the IoT. Now you need to invest in something else and something else. Have an understanding of that up front so that you can phase the implementation and make sure that you get the aha that you're after.
All right. So I'm a huge believer of the fact that technology changes lives for the good reason, and we are at a stage, especially after COVID, where it is becoming true, and everybody is able to see the true value of technology. Especially in the form of digital transformation. And very many industrial processes are getting digitalized, and we are in the right phase. And I genuinely think that we see a lot of success stories. Yes, there are some pitfalls, and we need to just look out for them, and we need to make sure we have backup strategies for that. And I love the fact how they said, fail fast, learn faster, but then get back on how would you roll it out on a production scale. I think that is very key, but otherwise it's looking very, very bright.
Thank you very much for your insightful sharing. So you can continue the conversation with them during the break later on. So I shall pass the time back to Scott.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Stefan, Steph, and Shobana. That was a great panel. Now we're going to test your skills. We're going to see how you can go with speed networking. Okay, we're a little bit behind time, so we've got about a 20-minute break, and then after the break we'll come back and we'll talk some sustainability and we'll talk about some people. So grab a coffee, grab whatever you need, do some speed networking, and we'll be back in at 3:30. Thanks, guys.